The popularity of cloud computing, along with its associated underlying infrastructure, which is the virtualization technology, makes it imperative for every IT professional to learn how to use and manage virtual machines, because platform as a service, which is one of the services that are run on cloud computing infrastructure, is basically virtual machines that are created out of physical infrastructure, which are being offered as services on the cloud for organizations to subscribe, provision them, and use them to host the services that they want to offer. So it's very important that as an IT professional, you know how to learn and use virtual machines, because along the line you may have to use them. So let's see some of the technical benefits or the technical use cases of virtual machines for us to know why it is important for you as an IT person to know how to use them. So number one is software testing and development. So if somebody is a programmer and the person is developing a certain program which is meant to be used on a Microsoft system, but here is the case, the person is using a Mac system to develop that software. You cannot test a software that is meant to be used on a Microsoft operating system on a Mac system. So the developer can create a virtual machine and then run the software he has developed in that uh, virtual machine that he has created, which is running the Microsoft operating system. In the same vein, if he wants to develop a program for a Mac system, he can create a virtual machine, install the Mac operating system into that VM, and test the program within that Mac virtual machine. Number two is the cybersecurity training and penetration testing. Now, cyber is everywhere because everybody is on the digital space. We have so many criminals here and there. So, if you're a student or a learner and you find yourself in that cybersecurity space and you want to do vulnerability testing, penetration testing, and test a host of other, let's say, viruses and so many other things, you cannot go and test a virus on a live system, knowing very well that that virus can impact the performance of that live system or just create problems on that live system. So you get yourself some virtual machines to build a virtual laboratory, and then you practice whatever you want to do in there. You can create firewall rules, penetrate databases to retrieve user accounts, credentials, and so many other things within the virtual machine if you are learning cybersecurity. Number three is running multiple operating systems. So back in the days, we used to do multi-booting. Even nowadays, it is still in the system. So now, instead of going to run multi-booting on a live system, as in install Microsoft Windows 10, let's say 8, 11 on one system, you can create virtual machines, run the multiple operating systems that you want. Let's say you want to use Microsoft Windows 10, 8, and 7, or use, let's say, Linux along with all of these operating systems. You can just create virtual machines and run the operating systems in them and be using them concurrently. The beauty of it is that you can power all of these virtual machines on and be using them simultaneously. But if you were to perform multi-booting on a live system, you can sign in into one of the operating systems at a go. You cannot be using all of them concurrently on the same live system. That's not possible. The fourth point here is the legacy software support. Now, some of the software may be obsolete. Maybe the life of that software has ended. The developer is no more supporting the software. And maybe also it was developed for an older or a legacy operating system like Microsoft Windows 7 or XP, or let's say Microsoft Windows 8 or 8.1 or older versions of Mac. So that software does not work on Microsoft Windows 10 or Microsoft Windows 11, but there is still some important things in that software that you may need. So you can create a virtual machine, run the legacy operating system in that virtual machine, and install that software within that virtual machine and use it to do whatever you want to use it for. IT education and training. Now, VMs are very important in that space, in that education space. Now, what I'm doing here is training or offering training tutorials on how to do many things. Along the line, we'll be doing so many interesting videos, but many of them will be done with virtual machines because it will be difficult sometimes to be using a live system for training. So if you're a student and you want to learn how to troubleshoot systems, optimize systems, go into server administration, go into networking systems, and a host of other things that you want to do. Virtual machines will help you a lot because you may not have the financial muscle to go and buy physical systems to come and build yourself a live laboratory in your home, but you can use virtual machines to learn all of these things. We also have server virtualization, where a company may have one or multiple servers, and then they create virtualized servers on these physical servers and use them to run critical resources. Now we have also disaster recovery and backup. The beauty of virtual machines is that they can be cloned easily, so that whenever there is an issue, you just restore that virtual machine. You can also migrate them from one system to the other. So when you are using a virtual machine, there is no fear of you going to lose your data whatsoever, because they can easily be cloned and then restored from backup. We also have cloud computing, which is dominating the information technology space currently. So virtual cloud computing basically runs from virtualized systems. So if we are talking about platform as a service, sorry, infrastructure as a service, where infrastructure as in a complete system or a complete computer system is being offered as a service. All of these things are physical systems that a person cannot be using from wherever he is. So virtual systems are created out of these physical systems and rented on the cloud space for organizations to subscribe and use them to run their services. We have sandboxing and untrusted applications. So if there is an application that you do not trust, you cannot just go ahead and run that application on your live system, knowing very well that it can go and impact the performance on that live system. So you have to create a virtual machine and install that program within that virtual machine. Then the last thing is enterprise application development. So enterprises use virtual machines a lot. If you're an IT person who knows how to use these virtual machines, they can just deploy a virtual machine as an FTP server or as a database server or as a web server to host their internal resources for them. So virtual machines are very, very important. So in this video, we are going to learn how to create and manage virtual machines with VMware Workstation Pro. So when you want to create a virtual machine, the most important thing is that you will need to turn on virtualization from your system setup utility. Nowadays, the modern systems that are coming into the system, many of them come with virtualization already enabled. So on a Microsoft system, you press Ctrl Shift plus the escape key to pull up your task manager, and then you click more details over here. You come to performance and then you select CPU. So over here you can see that virtualization has been enabled. Virtualization has been enabled over there, as you can see. So if it is a disabled, you need to go into the setup utility and enable it. That's the first thing you need to make sure that it has been enabled. It's very important. Otherwise, you can create the virtual machine all right, but you cannot turn them on. The next thing is that we open our Explorer with the Windows key plus E. And then inside our Explorer, we look for a volume within your disk that has enough space to accommodate the virtual machine that you'll be creating. So you can even label a whole volume as virtual machines, so that henceforth any virtual machine that you create will be stored within that directory. So in my case, I'm going to go to this volume. I already have a directory created labeled as virtual machines. So inside this directory, this is where I have my virtual machines, or the virtual machines that I have created. So it makes it very well organized, so that when you are looking for any VM that you have created, you can come into this directory. And then also the configuration files of the virtual machines, like this one, in this case for this VM, you can see that all of them are in that directory. You don't have to mix the configuration files of 2 or more virtual machines in the same directory. That is not appropriate. So here I'm going to go ahead and press Ctrl Shift plus N to create a new directory, and then label it as HP. Okay, let me make it Dell Inspiron. So Dell Inspiron is a virtual machine that I am going to create, and then the configuration files of the VM will be stored in this directory. Now, because it is a virtual machine, it uses the resources, the physical resources of the host system. So in this volume that I am going to store the virtual machine, it is going to take up space from that particular volume on the disk. So we will come back and check later on to see the space that it has taken from the disk. So after doing this, I will come to my VMware Workstation program. So here I will click create a new virtual machine, and then we go for the custom option. We click next. We click next again. Now let me go back here. Here we have hardware compatibility. This is more or less like a motherboard within your system. Let me put it that way. So we have workstation 17.5 or later downwards to workstation 5.x. So if you are using a legacy system, a laptop or a computer that is very old, you cannot go and pick the 17.5 or later. It may not function on your system because it will not be compatible with it. So you have to come and choose any of these lower versions. But the most current system nowadays, you can go for the 17.5 or later because it's very likely that it will be compatible with your system. So I'll maintain this option selected, and then I click next. But before that, you can see the limitations of the hardware compatibility that I have chosen. See, 128 gigabyte for memory, 32 processors, 10 gigabyte. So these are the specifications of that virtual machine, the limitations of that virtual machine you are creating. So if your physical resource has enough of these resources or of these specifications, then you can create a virtual machine that will be using these specs. So you can see how powerful that virtual machine will be. So I'll click next from here. Then I will install the operating system later, or you can just click here and then insert the ISO file of the operating system that you want to create. But in my case, I will do that later. So I'll click next from here, and then here we have Microsoft Windows, Linux, VMware, ESX, and other. In our case, we are installing Microsoft Windows. So I will click here to go for or to make a choice out of the many versions that we have here. So we are installing Microsoft Windows 10 x64. That is the 64-bit version of Microsoft Windows 10. So I'll click next, and then here I'll enter the name of the virtual machine. Usually I prefer the name of the VM to be the same as that of the directory within which the configuration files of the VM will be stored. So in this case, I'll type Dell Inspiron, and here it says location. So I'll click browse and navigate to where I created that directory. So here I have virtual machines and then Dell Inspiron. So I click Dell Inspiron, I click OK, and then I click next. So here you can choose the firmware type, either BIOS or UEFI. In my case, I'll go for the legacy BIOS. You can also go for UEFI if your system is running UEFI. So I'll click next from here. Here it says number of processors. I have only one processor on board, so I'll pick one. And then the number of cores per processor. So if you want to see the number of cores per processor, you access your task manager by pressing Ctrl+Shift+Escape. You come to performance, and then these are the number of cores. So here it is referring to the physical core, but not the logical. In my case, I have 4 physical cores and 4 logical cores. So the focus is on the physical cores. So I'll come back over here and then assign 2 of my 4 physical cores to this virtual machine. So if you have more cores, you can assign more. So I'll click next, and then this is the memory. In my case, I have 12 gigabytes of memory space, 12 gigabytes. So I can allocate 4 gigabytes for the virtual machine, or I can maintain 2 gigabytes for the VM. So whatever memory size you want to allocate, just click on the size and it will insert it there for you. So in my case, I am using 2 gigabytes. So I'll click next. And then with the network settings, I will use bridge networking. I'll click next again, maintain this option. And then here I'll come to SATA because my system does not have NVMe. It is using SATA. But if your system is using NVMe, you can maintain that option selected. So I'll click next again. And then here it says create a new virtual disk, use an existing virtual disk, or use a physical disk. In my case, I'm going to create a new virtual disk, so I'll maintain it selected. Click next again. And then Microsoft says the recommended size for Windows 10 x64 is 60 gigabytes. So let me just add 4 gig to make it 64. And then here it says allocate all the disk space now. When you go for this option, it means you are going to allocate the full capacity, which is the 64 gigabyte, to that space. We do not want that. We want it to be dynamically expanding. As and when files are being added, then it will keep on expanding. We don't want to allocate all the size, otherwise it will take all the space. All right, so we are going to store this one as a virtual disk as a single file. Now, when you store it that way, it improves the performance of the virtual machine. But when you want to export the VM later on, then you have to go for this option, split virtual machine into multiple files. This one will slow down or reduce the performance, but it will make it easier for you and faster when you want to migrate it. So later on, we will be doing how to export a virtual machine. So we are going to go for this option, split virtual disk into multiple files. So I'll click next, and then here, this is the virtual disk which has been created. So I'll go ahead and click browse, and then I will navigate once again to the directory where the Dell Inspiron folder is. So I'll select that one, click save, click next, and then I click finish. So after doing this, you can see that our virtual machine has been created with the specifications indicated over here. So we now have to install an operating system to the virtual machine. So I'll click cd/dvd. You know, back in the days, we used to use CDs to install Microsoft Windows 7. Later on, we came to using DVDs for Windows 8. Nowadays, we are using USB. So I'll come here, and then it says use physical drive. In my case, I'm going to use the ISO image. So I'll click use ISO image, and then I'll click browse. So on your system, you look for the operating system image or the operating system files. I am going to go for Microsoft Windows 10, and then I'll click OK from here. So the last thing is to power on this virtual machine so that your VM will start and go through the installation process. All right, so our operating system is loading and preparing for installation. Okay, so from here we click next, because obviously we are going to use English as our language. So we click next, and then we click install now. So our setup is starting. We are here, so we have to go for an edition for the operating system we are installing. So we have Windows 10 Home, Pro, Education, and then also Enterprise. So you always have to go for Pro or Enterprise, because the two of them have all the features that you are looking for. So you have to go for either of the two. In my case, I'm going to go for Windows 10 Pro with original equipment manufacturer option. So I'll go for OEM, click next, select the check the box for license terms, click next again, and then we come to custom install, because we are doing a clean installation. So here we have an unallocated space of 64 gigabytes. We click next for our installation to begin. So it's now copying the files. When it finishes, it will begin or ready itself for the installation. Now, the speed or how fast your system installs the operating system depends on the underlying infrastructure on which the virtual machine has been created. So if you have systems or a system that has higher specifications, let's say you have 12, 16 cores or 32 cores of processor, 64 cores or more, and then you have 64 gigabyte of memory space, 128 gigabyte of memory space with, let's say, 13th generation Core i9 or AMD Ryzen, a very powerful system, then your virtual machines as well are going to be very fast. You can see what I'm using is a bit slow because it's a legacy system. So the speed of the virtual machine, or how fast or efficient the virtual machines are going to be, relies solely on your underlying physical infrastructure. Because the fact that it's a virtual machine does not mean that it is running by itself or running on its own, because the hypervisor, which is the program, in this case, the the VMware Workstation Pro, is managing the virtual machine by using the physical resources on which that hypervisor has been installed. So it's very, very important for you to take note of that. Sometimes when you want to run two virtual machines concurrently, your system will become very, very slow because maybe it does not have the capacity to run those two virtual machines concurrently. But when you power off one of them and you have only one left, it becomes a bit faster. So those are the pros and cons of using your virtual machine. So you have to take note of that. It's very important. So our setup is still ongoing. So the system is now getting the devices ready. All right, so at this stage, we select our country, we maintain the United States, we click yes. Nowadays, Microsoft Windows 11 has different features compared to this one, but you will kind of go through a similar process. So here for the keyboard layout, we choose United States, and then we skip this option to move on to the next one. So here it says network connectivity. I don't have internet, and then I click connect with limited setup. So all of these things are operating system installation features. So at this stage, we create a local account for the system. So in my case, I'll make it a tech with Kobo. So tech with Kobo is the username for the system. I click next and then skip the password option to go to the desktop. So I click accept once again, and then the setup prepares for the desktop. So our desktop is ready for us. That concludes the installation of the operating system within the virtual machine. So you can see we have a full-blown Microsoft operating system running in this virtual machine. So I can right click the name of this virtual machine, come to power, click the shutdown option, suspend the guest, restart the guest, power off, suspend, and a host of others. So this virtual machine is going to work just as a live system will work. The beauty of it is that it's a software computer. It can be shut down at any time, migrated from one system to the other. You can just create a backup of it, clone it, create snapshots, and do so many things. Set it to automatically boot whenever your system starts, and use it to host many services within your local area network. You can even do a remote connection into this virtual machine. It's very, very interesting, some of the things that you can do in a virtual machine. So in subsequent videos, we are going to delve more into these virtual machines and some of the things that they can be used for. So here we have view options. So if I want to view it in full screen, I will just click here to enter full screen mode. But you can see that the VM is unable to fill my entire screen because we have to install VMware tools. So in the next video, we are going to learn how to install VMware tools in order to activate all the features within the VMware Workstation Pro for the virtual machine to properly integrate with the host system. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, kindly subscribe and then recommend it to your colleagues. Also subscribe to enjoy many of these interesting videos. Thank you once again for watching.